Hello, my name is Alexandra Georgescu and I'm a lecturer in psychology at King's College London. The project I'm presenting today, as the title reveals, investigates interpersonal synchrony in autism. What is interpersonal synchrony? Well, it looks pretty much like what you can see in this video clip from a movie by Jim Jarmusch, where the two musicians on screen are having a casual chat, and what you can observe is that their nonverbal behavior, their gestures and movements are coordinated, they are synchronized in time. And what I find remarkable is how intuitive and effortless this coordinating of movements is to neurotypical people. And the reason why I find it so interesting to study is because researchers attribute successful social interactions to this particular type of coordination, to this interpersonal synchrony. They say it contributes to people liking each other more, trusting each other more, and forming social bonds. But social interactions aren't as effortless for everyone. Autistic people have difficulties in social interactions. They find them distracting and overwhelming. But conceptually, we need to move away from the idea that social interaction difficulties are an individual problem of the autistic person, because interactions always take at least two people to function. And yet even research so far has mostly focused on paradigms and research designs where single autistic people were studied, usually in settings that were not necessarily very realistic. And we now clearly need to move the study of autism and social abilities from a single person paradigm to an interpersonal paradigm. And when we begin to understand that both interaction partners contribute to the outcome of the social interaction, we begin to wonder about whether or not it matters that the two individuals are in some ways well matched. For example, the interaction mismatch theory, which goes by different names, postulates that successful social interactions would happen between people with similar ways of processing and experiencing the world, whereas a breakdown in social interaction might happen between people with very differing ways of processing and experiencing the world, where there is less common ground, like, for example, in the case of an autistic person interacting with a neurotypical person. So I wanted to investigate this mismatch theory, and I invited people to the lab and asked them to pair up and have conversations, very naturalistic and relaxed conversations, in different types of dyadic or pair configurations. So there were people who were both neurotypicals engaged in social conversations, people who were both autistic, and people or mixed pairs where one person was neurotypical and the other one was autistic. And the hypothesis was that those dyads that are homogeneous in terms of their common shared background and experiences, that those dyads, the neurotypical and the autistic dyads, would achieve higher levels of interpersonal synchrony compared to mixed dyads where there is a mismatch. In order to quantify the amount of synchrony present in the videos, we used a method called motion energy analysis. And this method allows us to draw regions of interest as colorful boxes on the screen around the body parts that we want to extract motion from. And then we count the number of moving pixels from one frame to the next. So number of changing pixels from one frame to the next. Because this is a video, so we have multiple frames per second, 25 to be precise. In a 5-minute video, we get many of these frames and we can plot them. You can see these plots on the right side of the screen, for person A in red and for person B in blue. So the plots reflect the number of moving pixels over time. And then to get to the synchrony, we need to correlate the time series of person A with the time series of person B, and then we look for how much overlap, how much temporal overlap there is between the movements of these two people. And what we found was that all three different types of dyads, of pairs of people, achieved interpersonal synchrony. But as you can see in the graph, the bar in green, which represents the neurotypical dyads, achieved significantly more synchrony than the other two types of dyads, the autistic dyads and the mixed dyads. In other words, we did not find support for our initial hypotheses that we postulated. In fact, we find that the matching or mismatching of the people in a diet, or the homogeneity or heterogeneity when it comes to their shared experiences, doesn't matter for the achievement of interpersonal synchrony within the diet. Even though this is our main finding, I want to highlight two additional things. First of all, there are many ways to quantify emotion, and there are many ways to compute synchrony between two people, and there are also different contexts in which to study synchrony in. It's important to understand that these results are based on a particular methodology, and it will be important for future research to try to replicate and extend these findings by using different methods and also larger samples. In addition, we know that autistic people do not rely on the nonverbal channel as much when they interact with others, so the results don't necessarily come as a surprise. They rely much more on the explicit and verbal channel, and I think it's important to understand that people may achieve successful interactions in different ways. There isn't just one good way, for example, through interpersonal synchrony, that we achieve interaction success. And therefore, I want to highlight research from Catherine Crompton, for example, that highlights this specifically in the verbal domain, namely that autistic peer-to-peer information transfer is highly effective, whereas a mixed peer-to-peer information transfer in this sense tends to degrade a lot more quickly. Thank you very much for your attention. I also want to thank my collaborators and the participants, and I'm happy to be contacted by email if you have any questions.